Hello, good afternoon. We are back again. We have a very exciting game to show you today. It also turns out that this game is actually another offset that happened at the Qatar Masters. This game was between an Indian player, an international master. His name is Moksh Amit Doshi, who is rated 2383, against the Grandmaster Yakubboev Nordibek from Uzbekistan. It's kind of ironic because the first game I showed us, which was actually happened in the first round of the Qatar Masters, where the top seed, Abdusatorov, had an upset in a totally one position. He just kind of like blew it, and he allowed his opponent, the FIDE master, to win the game. So, well, in this case, it's not the same, as in the white player here completely outplayed the GM. The GM had there was no point in the game the GM had any kind of advantage. So in this game, of course, like it's another real situation, but the GM was completely outplayed, and by his laureated opponent, international master Moksh Amit Doshi from India. And also, this actually was a King's Indian defense, I think the orthodox variation. Okay, let us get right into it. So the game started with the move d4, knight f6, c4, d6, knight f3, g6. Now, I'm going to just mention this. Whenever we have the fianchetto, all right, with the pawn on d6, that's the King's Indian most of the time. Sometimes it could also be a perk, but it's a perk when your pawn is not on c4. If the pawn is on c2 and your knight is on c3, now this setup becomes a perk or sometimes a modern defense. But with the pawn on c4, d4, anytime you're playing against the d6, g6, bishop g7 variation, your opponent is playing the King's Indian defense. So let us continue how this game goes. So, sorry, I'm going to go back. I think I missed it. So knight c3 is played, bishop g7. And this is one very important thing we always have to know. Anytime you're playing any kind of opening, be very sure and positive about the ideas. What are the ideas of the opening? It's not just about bringing those pieces out. Every opening has certain ways they bring their pieces in the game. There are certain squares the pieces have to be. If you don't get to that square, and you will have to get to that square later on the point, you will have just lost a lot of time, and you don't want to do that. So bishop to g7, knight to c3, e4 is played. Now, this is a typical position from the King's Indian defense. Actually, from this position, the c4, d4, e4, like I said earlier, with the knight c3, knight f3 against the d6, bishop g7, g6, this is the typical Sicilian defense. So, what normally happens is white builds a very strong center of the center pawns, and then black has his bishop on the diagonal trying to hit at those center pawns. And anytime you're playing any kind of opening, like I said, always have an idea about what that opening is about. So, castles, bishop to e2, e5. Of course, black strikes immediately with the move e5. Now, white goes ahead to castle. Now, I'm going to say this real quickly. White is not winning a pawn by taking here, because if you capture, it captures back. If you capture the queen, it captures back. If you capture the pawn, it captures back. Because if you take the knight, you lose your knight. And at the end of the day, black is slightly better in this position. So this is just something I want you all to know. Of course, some people know, some people might not. So you're not really winning a pawn. So after the move e5, white castles, h6, rook e1. I like the fact that white is not picking a capture right now or closing the center. And this is something I always talk about. Always try to keep the tension in the game. Because the more tension in the game, the more probabilities your opponent has to think about. And another thing is, in a game of chess, if you're going to ease the tension, make sure you ease the tension to your own advantage. Because sometimes when you make a capture, it doesn't matter if you capture the same piece, somebody definitely is going to be getting a better value for that piece of the same value. All right, let's keep going. Rook to e1, knight d7, bishop to f1. Like I said, I like the way white just kept on improving this position now. Bishop to e2, so the rook is protecting e4, knight is protecting d4, queen is protecting d4. At some point in time, he's going to find a way to get this bishop in the game just to complete his development. Of course, you don't want to do this right now because there's always a knight g4 harassing your bishop, then you won't have to move the bishop back. So, knight goes to h7. Now, in the King's Indian defense, I want you all to remember this. In the King's Indian defense, with this punching, with the c7, d6, e5 punching, anytime the knight vacates the f file, either to h7, either to e8, either to d7 if the square is possible, either to g4 or either to h5, the idea is to advance the f pawn. Why do you want to advance the f pawn? Why do you want to advance the f pawn? Your pawn structure pretty much determines where you play. If your pawn structure points towards the king side, you want your armies to go towards the king side. If your pawn structure points towards the queen side, you want your army to go to the queen side. Looking at this position, we have how many pieces of the king side? We have the knight, we have the, even though this was on the queen side, this also could have some effects on the king side. So we have the queen 1, we have the rook 2, we have the knight on h7 3. Bishop right here doesn't really have any effects on this king side, but this bishop on c8 does. So we have the bishop on c8 1, the queen on d8 2, knight on d7 3, rook on f8 4, knight on h7 5. So black is trying to make the move f5 to try to create some play on the king side. I say this a lot in my videos. Create play, make something happen. It doesn't matter if you're a 600 rated player or a 2100 or a 2700. You have to create play. You have to try to make something happen. So knight h7 was played. Now captures on e5. Let me explain that. Now let's think about this. The idea of making the f5 pawn move is try to create some flank attack. Some flank attack. Remember this, flank attack. So anytime there's a flank attack, what do you want to do? You want to close the center, right? Cool. Now, anytime there's a flank attack against you, what do? You open up in the center. d5 would not be a very smart move here. Not a smart move. Because now you've pretty much closed the center for the black pieces. Telling the black pieces, you know what? Just throw your pawns at me and, just let me have it. So this is not the time to start closing the center. So d takes e5. This is pure, understanding of positions. This is not just about openings now. Anytime there's a threatening or on a flank attack, you want to break in the center. D takes e5. D takes e5. Now bishop e3. Finally, white develops its last minor piece. Remember, there is no knight g4 to harass the bishop on e3. Now you might ask me, well, what is this bishop on f1 doing? This bishop on f1 is an MVP. And this is something I've said also in some of my videos. The fact that your piece is on the original square doesn't mean it's doing nothing. But not the piece like one on c8 here. This is not really doing anything right now. Although you might have some pressure here at some point in time in the game. The bishop on f1, actually, all white pieces are actually looking very good. So all white needs to do right now is to move up the last rank so that rooks are connected, and then centralize the rooks, and white is just ready to roll. And this is another thing I always say. Chess is no respecter of nobody. Your rating doesn't give you an automatic win or whatever. No, you have to earn it. Okay, so that means if you play badly, you're going to get punished by someone that knows how to do the punishing. So let's keep going. So f5 is played, takes on f5, and that's another thing. With the move f5, you want to take the pawn because your opponent is trying to attack you on the flank. You want to make sure every part of the board is flexible. That means there are no tensions. You want to break the tension. You want to make sure there are free flow of pieces. Because when you do that, your opponent is going to get overstretched. Because your opponent can't be attacking you on the king side. Think about this. Your opponent cannot be attacking you on the king side and then trying to defend in the center on the queen side. That's not going to work. So let's keep going. He takes on f4, captures back. g3. This is actually, I don't so like the move g3. This is principle-wise. I'm going to say why I don't like the move. Never move a pawn where you're being attacked. These are just my principle. This is something I came up with many years ago. Never move a pawn when you're being attacked. Before, when you move the pawn, it actually helps your opponent to get to you faster. What would have been a better move here? I like c5. I like c5. c5 is a good move. Even queen d5 check with the idea of rook fd1 is a good move. So, but here g3 was played. We want to make this game as quick as possible. And c6. Now, let us take a brief, we're going to come back to this point. Let us take a brief look at this position. and ask ourselves, who is better and why? We're going to start with the black pieces. The rook on A8 is doing absolutely nothing. You have just one square to go to. That's not a good sign. The bishop on C8 is doing nothing. What I'm doing right now is I'm teaching us how to approach a position, how to think about a position. When you have a position in front of you, you want to know who is better. These are the things to think about. And after you've concluded with your thought, you can actually say, you know what, white is better. This is what white needs to do. Or black is not looking good. This is what black needs to do. Bishop on C8 is doing nothing. Queen on D8 is all right. Rook on F8 is okay. It's on like an half open. Well, it's not an open file, but there's a possibility the file gets open. Bishop on G7 is fine. Even though the pawn is on E5, the pawn can be advanced. Once the pawn is advanced, the bishop gets to the knight on H7 is not looking bad either. But definitely we can agree that the bishop on C8 and rook on A8 is actually not doing much thinking right now. What about the white pieces? White bishop is looking very good, looking at both sides of the board, the queen side and the king side. The knight on F3 is looking very good. It has the possibility of going to H4 and G6. Bishop on F1 has possibility of coming to this side of the board or that side of the board. And the queen is looking good. The rook is looking good on E1. And after the queen vacates the last round, we can bring the rook to D1, putting pressure on the D file. So white is actually better here. There is no magic. There is nothing. It doesn't matter if I'm 2300 and you are 2900 or whatever. White is just better. So, and this is it. If you have a better position, what do? You have to attack. Not necessarily the king, but you have to attack where you think. You have to use the advantage you have. Looking at this position, number one thing that comes to my mind right now is this weak G6 square. Why is this square a weakness? Anytime you have a piece, pawn, or square that is undefended, it's a weakness. Especially if those weakness is in your own territory. So the G6 square is a weakness. If the knight can get to G6, it's going to cause some embarrassing situation for the black pieces. Okay, let's keep going. C6 is played. What's the idea of C6? I think probably the idea of C6 is to actually let the queen come out, maybe maybe keep an eye on the D5 square. That's another possibility. You don't want this knight jumping or the queen giving a check. So C6, but black has to be really worried about bishop on C8 because if your bishop doesn't get to the game as quick as possible, you can easily get busted. So C5 is played very strong. I like this move because number one, it makes sure this D6 belongs to the white pieces, even though it originally belongs to black pieces. The C5 pawn is protected by the bishop, and by moving the pawn to C5, you've just cleared the C4 square for your bishop to come say hi to this king on G8. Think about it. You get a bishop on C4 check, the king goes to H8, and all of a sudden your knight goes to G6. What would that be? That's a checkmate. So already white has some kind of plan that it can cause mayhem for black in this position. Let's keep going. E4. Now, E4 is a move that you would have to make a move at some point in time. You know, it looks good, but it's actually a bad move. Why is it a bad move? Why is it a good? Why does it look good? Because by playing the E4 move, you created a square for your knight to jump. The bishop has this possibility here, putting pressure. And apart from that, the pawn on E4 actually puts pressure on the knight on F3, forcing this knight to move. Well, guess what? This knight wanted to move anyways. So by moving the pawn to E4, you have a strong white presence. That means the dark squares are going to be a little bit compromised. So the knight pretty much just jumps. No, there's a queen check force. Remember the B3, the C5 move, giving us that diagonal. The queen jumps to B3 check. The king moves to H8. Knight H4 threading checkmate. Checkmate. So you have to defend that square here. So how does it defend the square? It plays queen to E8, defending the G6 square. So all white pieces are looking good, right? If you have the white pieces, what do you think would be a good move for white here? Now think about a piece that white hasn't moved at all. These are the things I think about. You know, think about any piece that white hasn't moved at all. Let's just find out. Has the knight moved? Yes, it has. What about the bishop? Yes, it has. What about knight on C3? It's moved. What about the queen on B3? It has moved. What about the rook on E1? What about the rook on A1? Not as exactly. So now we have decided that we have to move the rook on A1. But the question is, where do you want to move the rook? Do you want to move the rook to B1? That would be crazy because that's a close file, doing nothing. You want to move the rook to C1? Still not doing anything. You want to block by your pieces. What about the square D1? Absolutely good move. Because with the rook on D1, you have pressure on this long diagonal. You have the possibility of going to D6 to build the house on D6 since the black pieces have given you some land. So you can just build a nice house on it could be a duplex depending on your taste. So this is a good square for the white pieces, but you have to get to D1 first. So white plays rook d1, and this is what I say. Chess is no respecter of nobody. Only good moves count. If you don't play good moves, you're going to get in trouble. You don't put your rating on the board and say, you know what, just keep out looking at my rating and just start making back. No, no, no. You have to make these good moves yourself. So knight to e5 is played. And think about it. Black really has to do something. All these pieces really can't do much right now. And the number one problem for black in this position is the bishop on c8. We're not even talking about the rook here, the bishop on c8. So this bishop has to get in the game as quick as possible. Knight e5 is an interesting move. Why? Because with the knight e5, you're threatening the bishop to c, although it drops a pawn, okay? But with the knight on e5, you have the pressure on f3, there's pressure on g4, there's pressure on... you have something. But now, if you make such a good move like a knight on e5 and you're still worse, that means your position is just bad. Now, I really want to do a knight g6 check here, but I can't do that because the queen is defending it. Think about it. If I can do knight g6 check, if the queen is not there, if it moves, well, it cannot move because it's mate. If I do a knight g6 check, right, and the queen is not there, that will be checkmate. But the queen is stopping me from doing the knight g6 check. So, not just the queen, but the knight. So the knight is always stopping me. So let's see if I can get rid of that knight, f4. And I like this move f4 because now you're opening up more position. Now it'd be very crazy for black to exchange here. Because now look at this rook, look at this bishop, look at this coin. See, now if there's a pressure, there's going to be a big problem for black on the e file. Because once the bishop moves away, you're going to have to be looking at this rook on e1. And so you don't even have the time for your bishop to e6. So f4 was played, knight goes to g6. Or now I can just take knight check, but the queen takes back. But now white plays a very, very nice move I love. You know, this is, we call this a deflection. Rook to d8. Now I have a question for you. If you never had your rook on a1 to d1, how would you have this possibility? You wouldn't. So that's why in every game of chess, put your pieces on the best squares possible. Put them on good squares, good things are going to happen. If you put them on bad squares, bad things are going to happen. Like I said, there are no magics in chess. So let's keep going. Rook d8, and you have to take it. You have to take the queen because there is no other squares you can go to defend the knight. So you have to take the rook, sorry. Now you have to take it, but it takes the knight, but it gives up the queen. Now this is what black was banking on. After rook takes queen, there's a knight f3 check. That's an in-between move. The king moves, it takes the rook. Now, black is down a queen, right? Black lost his queen. For the queen, he has a knight and a rook. Is it enough? No, it's not. Because you still have to worry about this bishop yet to get in the game. You still have to worry about this knight not really doing much. Bishop on g7 is pretty much the MVP of black right now. Because it cuts, no, I won't say bishop on g7. I would say the knight on f3 because it's closer, right? Bishop on knight 3 and f3. So that are the two active pieces for black. So let's keep going. Rook to d1. Of course, we have to go to d1. Not just to move away from the knight attacking the rook, but also to try to get some pressure into the black's position. So, knight takes h7, h2. You can have that pawn. That's not a problem. Bishop to d4. It's time to get rid of all the pieces defending this king so that this king can really be in the open. Knight goes to g4 check. King goes to e1. You have to come to e1 because you don't want to block your bishop by going to e2 because then your bishop doesn't have any place to move to. Rook goes to e7. Bishop takes check. King captures back. Rook d6. You know, we talked about when the pawn went to c5 earlier, we talked about that square being very available for white. Now, all of a sudden, white is controlling that square. So knight goes to f8. Actually, at this point in time, you really can't blame black for whatever moves he made because there is just nothing black is going to make that's going to make his move, his position better. You know, whatever. You've already lost your point, so you've already compromised your position a great deal. So knight f is played, knight to e2. Now, this is another thing we have to start thinking about. The knight is good on c3, right? So it's a good square, but think about it. You're really not doing anything on c3. You really can't get much on c3. So what do? You relocate the knight to another square where you can get something done. You know, I like d4 because on d4 there's pressure on f5, there's pressure on e6. So how do I get to d4? I have one, let's see, how can I have one, wait a minute. Actually, I can I get to d4? One, two. Interesting. If I want to get to d4, I can actually go one, two. I can't even go get that square because there's a knight there. It would be nice to get a knight on d4. How are we going to get a knight on d4? I'm not sure. So let's see what happened here. Knight to e2 was played. We can't even go to g. We can go to g1 here, but still doesn't do anything. We need the knight. Oh, what am I talking about? That will calm down. In two moves. 1, 2. About. So knight e2 was played. Bishop e6. Queen to c3. Check. King goes to h7. Knight goes to d4. Putting pressure on the bishop and the pawn. So what to do? Rook goes to e8. Trying to keep the positions together. One thing why black is really, really bad in this position is even though he has beautiful looking rooks, rooks want open files. Without open files, your rooks are useless. Forget about them. So rook goes to e8, bishop to e2, trying to get the bishop on a good square. Now bishop think this might be threatening the idea of pawn push. That's a possibility. He says, no, I don't want you to do that. So I'm going to move my pawn to h5. So he plays bishop to d1. What's the point? Winning a one position is very, very interesting. Winning a one position, you have to, yes, you have the game, but you have to take your time to make sure that there are no coming back for your opponent. So bishop takes would have been a very, very good move because after if the h takes, rook takes e6 is a very good move, followed by knight takes. I mean, this just pretty much breaks down the black's defense. But instead, in this position, the white pieces went to bishop to d1. I don't know why he's trying to do that. So a6 is played. Absolutely has nothing to do with this position. a6 is just like buying time. But hey, white said another bad move by white. Queen to c2. This is very important. And I think the idea of queen c2 is to take the knight, bring the queen to h4, h2 near h4. You have to get something done here as quick as possible. If you don't, you can just give black a chance to get back in the game. Already, white has lost a lot of advantage by not taking the knight on g4. So queen c2 is played. I'm not sure what white's plan is right now. So queen c2, rook to g7, queen to g2. I think the threat is probably queen goes to h3, putting pressure here. If he defends, it can also sneak in here, ready to take, so that the queen can come here and just go crazy. Okay, so rook goes to g6, queen h3, pawn push is made. Now I like this beautiful move black play, white play, rook d8. Now the idea is to reduce all the ability for white, for black to wage any kind of war. So rook takes, queen takes check, king move, queen takes back. It did the rook check, king moves to d2, e3 check, and at this point in time, I don't know if black lost on time or resigned, but I think at this point in time, the game was pretty much over. What would have been a possible continuation? I think the king can just step to c2. And after the rook check, the king can step to c3. So I really don't see anything that black can achieve in this position. After knight to f2, we can play bishop to f3, defending everything. This is weak, this is weak, this is weak. The king is not looking good, and it's just a matter of time. All right, that's it. But that's it for now. And that's another nice game, exciting game that was played at the Qatar Masters. An offset, by the way, an offset. One thing I just want us to keep in mind is if you play good chess, good things are going to happen. So and just play the position. Doesn't matter who you're playing. The GM, whoever the is, still has to play the game. All right, thanks for now. And if you enjoy this game, if you learned something in this game, just like and share. That would be nice. Let more people learn from this. And if you have any contribution, or there are any games you want us to check out, please kindly leave me a message. I will deeply appreciate that. Thank you again. It's a cold Wednesday in Washington, D.C. Have a wonderful day. Take care. God bless. And bye for now.